happens if you don't get here early enough?
This won't come. Or either we have to park some other place and have to walk a distance.
Parking is already tight at the University of Texas. KXAN camped out for 2 hours before one of the latest men's basketball games. We found plenty of fans sleeping in their cars, making sure they did not miss out on the closest spots available. This investigation started after we received several complaints from fans about potential safety and accessibility problems.
They claim UT is selling spaces meant for disabled drivers to any driver willing to pay more on game day. We checked to find out what's legal. Because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, UT must designate only 2% of the first 1,000 parking spaces as handicapped. Then just one more for every 100 spaces after that. And the school says it's actually doing better than the minimum. But KXAN investigator Lindsey Bramson found many of those spots are not all that convenient or close.
It's not surprising the most dedicated Longhorn fans show up long before tip-off. But Lester Johnson and his wife Mary say they get to the Irwin Center at least 2 hours early for a different reason.
If we didn't get here, where I have to park would be by the tennis courts.
Both have respiratory problems, and Mary uses a walker to help her get around. So they want to make sure they get one of the limited number of handicap spaces closer to the court. Do you feel like there are enough handicap spaces close to the Irwin Center?
No. No. By a long shot, no.
The University of Texas says it's because construction of its new medical school next door is taking up a lot of room.
We have a lot that's north of the Irwin Center that has lost half of its spaces, and those spaces were predominantly ADA spaces.
And so that left us with a deficit of about 26 spaces.
Around the Irwin Center, you'll find more than 3,300 parking spaces for basketball fans on game night. Legally, that means UT must reserve just 44 for disabled drivers. And right now, even with the loss of some spaces to construction, the school says it has 3 times that number.
We have at least 100 spaces more than we're required to have by law for basketball.
But many of those aren't so close. If you're not one of the lucky ones to get an ADA parking space in this parking lot directly next to the Irwin Center, you have no choice but to find another parking lot. And one of your options involves crossing the busy intersection of MLK, which will bring you here to this parking lot where there are a few additional ADA spaces. Do you think there's enough parking for the disabled?
I don't think there's enough parking for anybody on campus.
Unless you're willing to pay.
It depends on how deep your pockets are, where you park.
Some of the closest spaces to the game are reserved for Longhorn Foundation members who fork over at least $600 to request their preferred parking. Handicap parking, close or not, is just $7.
What do you say to all the people who feel like you give more priority to members of the Longhorn Foundation than to the disabled?
Well, I don't agree that that's true.
And like a lot of fans, Lester and Mary are not prepared to pay much or willing to walk very far. So they'll just have to keep showing up early and waiting for something to change. The good news, once construction wraps up, the school says there will be about 100 ADA spaces for basketball game fans next season. And that's more than before. UT says because of our questions, they're going to look into whether they can provide more ADA spaces for people who need them. Of course, we'll stay on top of this and talk to fans next season to see if UT keeps these promises. Reporting at the University of Texas, Lindsey Bramson, KXAN Investigates.
And it's not just the Frank Irwin Center where UT is switching the type of parking during big events. We took a closer look and found the same at DKR, Texas Memorial Stadium for football, and also at Bass Concert Hall. We also dug up the audit UT commissioned that officials say proves their parking is ADA compliant. It's in this story on the homepage of KXAN.com right now, along with a link to parking maps so you can find where handicap spaces exist during these big events. And if you have any parking problems, we've also added some links to show you where you can file complaints directly. That's online right now at KXAN.com.